Welcome to another edition of the It's Cavalier podcast. It's your boy Mack. And tonight, I just want to discuss a very simple concept, a simple question. Are the Cavaliers contenders? Is this version of the Cleveland Cavaliers, the 2024-25 version of the Cavaliers as currently constructed, are they title contenders? In my opinion, it's a little complicated. It's a little complicated because this offseason obviously still has a lot of time left. But as currently constructed, I think a reasonable case can be made that they are not yet at that step. They still have two very clear needs. That of a backup 4-5, and this is assuming, and this is the big thing. This is assuming that both Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley are going to be returning. That's the feeling that I got. I don't know about you guys, but that is the feeling that I got leaving the Kenny Atkinson introductory press conference. A lot of things that were said during that press conference indicated that the core four was going to be returning. There were some nice things said about Darius Garland. There were a lot of questions asked about the usage of Evan Mobley and how Kenny is going to implement his offense and what different things that he is going to be using Evan Mobley to do heading into next season. And it made me feel good, right? It made me feel like we're going to see a completely different version of this Cavaliers team. I do believe that coaching matters. I'm a big believer that making a change atop at the head coaching position can work wonders for this squad. And make no mistake, I was a huge supporter, always have been a huge fan of previous head coach JB Bickerstaff. I'm very happy that he landed on his feet, got another head coaching gig with the Detroit Pistons, which is a wonderful spot for him. We know what his strengths are as a head coach in terms of getting guys, taking control of a rebuilding franchise. He will get you headed in the right direction. That's essentially what he did with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, obviously, the runway that he had, it ran out, right? It ran out. He just was not necessarily the man to get the Cavaliers to the next step. That proverbial next step being title contention, true contendership, competing with the Bostons and the Milwaukees, and hell, throw Philadelphia in there, right? I don't know. There's a number of teams that you could list in there. New York, Philly, not Philly. Indiana's on the upswing. Miami's proverbially there every single year. They're always in contention, no matter where they finish at in the regular season. But that next step, JB just could not get us there. And so the move from JB to Kenny, that to me, even if the Cavaliers do not make a significant move via the trade market or in free agency, and we know based upon these past couple of days in free agency, the Cavaliers haven't done shit. They haven't done shit, and their big moves so far have been bringing in Kenny Atkinson, and the re-signing of Donovan Mitchell was a whole nother topic within itself. Wonderful to have him on board for a few more seasons added to that contract that he already had. And prior to that, you have to understand this man was under contract through the 2024-25 season with a player option for 2025-26 prior to signing that extension. So I'm glad that a few more years have been added to that. But those have been the two big moves from this front office. The DeMarre Carroll hiring, that's another solid addition. Jordan Ott, adding him to the equation, wonderful. Adding Donovan Mitchell's guy and Johnny Bryant, that is another wonderful addition to this head coaching staff, and I'm very excited to see what direction they end up going in for some of the other hires. But you are left with the impression that this is what we're getting. You are left with the impression that this is the team that we have. Now, the other big part of this equation is Isaac Okoro. It's being reported, right? It's being reported very frequently that Isaac Okoro is likely to be moved via sign and trade. Miles Bridges is off the board, thankfully. I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time talking about why I'm happy that ended up not being the case, but Miles is off the board. So the two players that the Cavaliers are really, really searching for in regards to that sign and trade happen to be Cam Johnson of the Brooklyn Nets. You can throw Dorian Finney-Smith in there, I suppose, some three, I guess, and or Hunter, DeAndre Hunter from the Atlanta Hawks. All names that I believe would be real pieces added to this team. Pieces that I believe could take them to that next step in contendership. But as of right now, we're not there yet. We're just not there right now. I look at what other teams have done, and like I've said in previous pods, I have never been the type of guy, never been the type of fan to look at what another team has done and think to myself, well, shit, we got to keep up with them. We got to figure out how we too can match the move that they have made. But I look at some of the moves that have been made, not only in the East in general, but the NBA as a whole, right? I look at some of these moves that have been made in free agency. I look at some of these moves that have been made via trade. And I'm saying to myself, well, man, it's getting increasingly tougher and tougher to look at this Cleveland team and say to myself, we're good. We're good. We don't need to do anything at all. But at the same time, I do understand the fact that we just don't have the requisite assets to make some of these moves that we've seen from other teams. We don't have the firepower. A lot of people continuously forget that the Donovan Mitchell trade was our big swing. That was our big swing to acquire a superstar level talent, a top 15 player. We gave up a lot to get him. Multiple firsts, some pick swaps. Lowry Markin, a lot of people would love to have him back, right? We gave up Colin Sexton, who was in a contract stalemate with the Cavs for the longest. And, the pick in the 2022 draft, Ochai Agbaji. There was a lot given up in that acquisition. And in doing that, you kind of strapped yourselves to a degree in terms of what your maneuverability is in terms of actually being able to make some of these ancillary trades, some of these moves along the margins that other GMs and other franchises have been able to do. That was our big swing, ladies and gentlemen. And I think people continuously forget about that. But with that being the case, that doesn't mean that there aren't ways for this team to improve. But you can't get blood out of the turnip. You cannot force teams to give you a trade for pennies on the dollar. You just cannot do that. Can Isaac Okoro, can that sign and trade of him get you back a Cam Johnson? Possibly, but it's all completely dependent upon how much a team like Brooklyn, who it looks to appear to be in a fire sale mode or at least heading towards a massive rebuild, how low are they willing to sell on Cam Johnson? How low are they willing to sell on Dorian Finney-Smith? How low is Atlanta on the idea of a DeAndre Hunter move, right? Do we have the pieces to facilitate that? Can we make that happen? It's easier said on our end, right? I can say, okay, we can throw Okoro and Karis LeVert or whatever pieces, George Niang. It's easy for me to say that, but at the end of the day, without attaching real draft capital to that, what is the real enticing offer that we can actually make? I don't know. I'm hoping that something gets done. I'm hoping that Atlanta looks at DeAndre Hunter's contract and says to themselves, well, man, we got to move up all this money because if I'm not mistaken, heading into the next season, he's going to be making about $23.6 million. That's a lot of money. And so maybe they're saying to themselves, okay, we'll sell low enough on him and we'll take whatever you can give us back just to move up all for that money. But you never really know. That's really it for the Cavs. All the big names in free agency have been acquired. A lot of the names that I had penciled in, guys like Dario Saric or Kelly Oubre, Buddy Hield, these names are gone. Most of the names that I felt would have been actual contributors, needle movers, they're just not available. There were a ton of them. Simon Fontecchio, he was one of the latest to go that I had recently fallen in love with the idea of bringing them in. Trenton Wofford, if I'm not mistaken, is still out there. But at the end of the day, do the Cavaliers really, really have enough to be able to go out there and beat out any offer that they can give him in restricted free agency? Or would Brooklyn prefer to match? Tough. There just isn't a lot of maneuverability that can occur. And so this is where we're at. Fans are pissed off, right? Fans are pissed off that we don't have, or we haven't seen a move yet outside of the Donovan Mitchell mood in the coaching hires. But at the end of the day, we have to understand, like, this is what we got. These are the assets that we have at our disposal. There's only so much that Karis LeVert or George Niang or Dean Wade or, any number of like non-core four pieces will get you in a return without significant draft capital attached to that, which we just do not have. And so this is the case that we find ourselves in. This is the situation that we find ourselves in. It sucks ass. I get it. But I'm still very, very hopeful that something will get done. I think ultimately, as much as it pains me to admit this, moving off of Okoro is likely the best possible route if you hope to acquire somebody that will actually make a real difference. It's just all about how other teams view him, truly. Because I think there's still a lot of potential there as a 3-and-D wing, albeit undersized in certain degrees. But at the end of the day, if you're hoping for a Cam Johnson, if you're hoping for a DeAndre Hunter, if you're hoping for a Dorian Finney-Smith or somebody of the ilk, that's really our best route. They do not appear like they're going to move off Jarrett Allen. They do not appear like they're going to move away from Darius Garland. Those are the other two big trade chips. I just don't see it happening. Dr. Joby says up here is one of the first comments that really caught my eye. We need all-star Garland, full-time 4 superstar Evan Mobley in a solid backup center. Jesus, I can't read today. And we are contenders. That's a lot, right? We do need Darius Garland to return to his all-star level of play. And this is the thing that's been pissing me off a lot lately about Darius Garland and not him, but the people that have been just talking so much shit lately is the fact that people just throw the 2022-23 season out completely and dismiss it as if this man wasn't playing like an all-star. Yes, he wasn't named to the all-star team, but a reasonable case can be made that Darius Garland actually played at a higher, more efficient level in 2022-23 season than he did in his actual all-star campaign. Think about it. They had to include the likes of Donovan Mitchell beside him. Numbers basically stayed the same. The efficiency rose in numerous areas. And it didn't feel at all like he struggled. The playoffs, I get it. If you want to use that as an argument, it is what it is. But he was one of the only Cavaliers that actually contributed big time game. At least I believe it was game 2, right? Where he actually shined. But nobody really truly moved the needle in that series. Even Donovan Mitchell in his first series as a Cavalier in the playoffs against New York, he stunk it up too. Everybody really did. So I don't put that solely on Garland, but people, to me, they just completely dismissed the 2022-23 campaign like Garland wasn't playing at an all-star level. I get it. He had a struggle of a season in 2023-24 by his standards, but I still believe that with a full off season, not dealing with, not rehabbing from injury and adding some of that weight, the significant weight loss, 12 plus pounds that he experienced during the season, I do believe that he will return to being that all-star level talent that he is. For however you feel about the contract that he was given, if you have come away from this offseason and you've looked at some of the contracts that have been handed out, his contract is looking better by the day. I mean, some of the contracts that have been handed out, we just saw Franz Wagner get paid. This man got paid. There have been numerous other contracts that I could point out, but I'm just not going to do that because I understand that that is the way of the NBA. You have to pay to keep talent in-house, and especially for a small market team, you have to be able to retain those pieces. Some of the best teams out there, homegrown talents like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they didn't go out and trade for those guys. They waited for them to develop, and they got the money when it was time. And we see how far that has gotten them. You could say this about basically every real contender out there. They didn't just trade to make their team, right? There was a runway, they executed that runway, and they allowed these guys time to develop. Darius Garland is still a very young player. He's just coming off of his 3rd career playoff series, right? The New York series, the Orlando series, and then Obviously, Boston, who nobody was really truly going to overcome. But at the end of the day, I just urge fans, give it time. I get the dynamic between the backcourt, an undersized backcourt between himself and Donovan Mitchell. However you feel about that, if you feel like the team just cannot succeed with two undersized guards in the backcourt, I understand that. I do. But I do at least implore you to give it one more season, especially under a head coach that is a known developer of talent. And that, my friends, that is what truly intrigues me about Atkinson. It's not just the motion-based offense. It's not the simple fact that we're going to be playing with a quicker pace, a much quicker pace, might I add, after finishing top or bottom six in pace the last 3 seasons under JB, or the fact that we're going to be seeing an increased amount of three-point attempts. It is legitimately the fact of player development that is going to be available. Something that basically just fell by the wayside under JB. Kobe Altman acknowledged as much, right? The development of Evan Mobley was kind of sidelined to win now mode, right? We entered win now mode and we kind of sacrificed Mobley's development in the process. All these young guys, Isaac Okoro, Darius Garland, names that should still be developing at the ages that they're at, but they've stagnated. And I think a lot of that had to do with just not having a real sense of player development. And under Atkinson, he brings that to the table. You can look at the work that he did with D'Angelo Russell, getting the absolute most, the best season that we have seen by far from him under Atkinson, getting career years out of Karis LeVert, out of DeMarre Carroll. I mean, I continuously say this man had Jared Dudley playing significant basketball. And that's not a slight against Jarrett, but you guys understand what I'm saying. He is a known player developer. The player development that we are in store for players like Evan and Darius in particular, that is truly intriguing. And that to me should spark improvement. The motion-based offense will benefit numerous guys. I think that when you look at shooters like Sam Merrill, when you look at shooters like Mack Strus, you look at cutters. If Isaac returns, he would fall into this category, right? As cutters. I look at what they've been able to do in years past, and I see the potential, but it wasn't necessarily unlocked under JB. I think that will be much different during the Kenny Atkinson era, and so that within itself should spark an improvement. Kirk Davis says, bring in Cam. I agree, Cam. Kirk, I agree completely in regards to this. I hope we are able to get Cam, but it just all depends upon how low Brooklyn is willing to sell on him. Kirk also says, do you think Kenny can help developing Bates? Absolutely. I mean, you look at what Emoni Bates has been able to do in the G League with the Cleveland Charge. I almost always slip up and say Cam Charge because it just doesn't feel natural. If anybody else feels the same way in regards to that, please let me know in the comments. But I feel like calling them the Cleveland Charge still just does not feel right to me. But nevertheless, I look at some of the progress that he made with the Charge, and I think that a real point can be made that the biggest translatable skill that he has was sort of built upon, but the way that they used him with the Charge was never truly going to accentuate development. I think this man at this point needs real minutes on the NBA hardwood, right? I think there's only so much that a player like him can glean from G League action. He was right up there in terms of points per game in that league. The shooting, the green light that he had, obviously he would not have that with the Cavs. But the skill set that he has as an off-ball shot maker, especially spot-up threes in the corners, and even above the break, I do believe that can translate. And I think that if a guy can unlock him, it's going to be Kenny Atkinson. We know the areas of development that Bates has. The rebounding, not particularly great at the size that he has. The rebounding percentage was kind of trash, to be honest. The facilitation, right? The defense. These are all very real concerns with Emoni Bates. The weight. And what? I mean, stay tuned on that because Emoni's actually put on weight. I believe that this man can develop into a quality role player. The question is that going to be this year? Can that happen this season? Will Atkinson prioritize it? It's tough. He has the track record for developing these guys, but I do believe that he has the ability to get more out of him. JB notoriously did not play far into his bench. JB notoriously did not trust young players. I know this is a team full of young guys, but I mean, when it comes right on down to it, JB notoriously just has not trusted his younger talent. He didn't give, and I see a comment down here that I'm going to address in a minute by HJ17 Gaming. Also, what happened to Isaiah Mobley, because he fits right in here too. Isaiah was not he was not tender, right? They did not extend a qualifying offer to Isaiah Mobley. They could still sign him outright, but Isaiah never truly got enough time to prove what he could do as well. I have to wonder how much of that was on JB versus they just the coaching staff as a whole, the franchise as a whole, just did not believe that Isaiah had the goods. Hard to say, but he kind of fell by the wayside. And Emoni, clearly there were areas that he needed to work on, but he didn't necessarily get a lot of opportunities himself. I just think that Kenny is going to be able to get more out of these guys than JB ever truly did. And that's coming from a huge JB Bickerstaff fan, right? But to answer your question in short, yes, I do believe that Kenny Atkinson will will expedite the developmental process of Emoni Bates. I like what I see out of the young man. I think that the skill set there is an off-ball shooter. That's always something that should be able to carry over to the NBA level. Now, the question is with him, can improvement be made in some of these other areas that will at least mask some of his deficiencies, right? Eric says, can they get a legit 6'8" scoring small forward? If they don't, they will continue to fall short. Trade Okoro and Lillard, Wade can go as well. I mean, all these names, right? They all have significant flaws, whether it be lack of shot creation, lack of volume in terms of their three-point shot or efficiency in terms of some of these names, or they're just on the shorter side. And I think that's why a lot of people, including myself, are a little skeptical when they selected another what appeared to be undersized guy in Jalen Tyson. I've since come around on the idea, and I liked Tyson coming out of that draft. I put out some content on him. But at the end of the day, I understand, right? One of the biggest needs that we have on this team is a bigger wing, somebody that is a legit, not with shoes off and shit like that. And I understand, like, anybody's going to jump in the comments and say, well, they don't play without their shoes. I get it. But a legit 6'7", 6'8" small forward, right? Somebody that you know can go out there and utilize their size at the three. Can they get their own shot? Can they play defense? Everybody wants a 3-and-D wing. That's the big, that is the archetype to have these days, but they're so damn difficult to acquire that they're rarely available, and they cost a lot when they do become available. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. We do need a bigger wing out there, somebody who can preferably get their own shot and play some defense, right? At least not be a net negative out there in that regard. Cedric Taylor says, if we move off of Levert, where does the bench scoring come from? So that's the thing, right? And that's the issue, because Levert, if you're not going to move Jarrett Allen or Darius Garland, Levert is one of your only other trade chips, along with the Okoro sign and trade, because that's really it. George Niang is not going to get you anything. Dean Wade, that's not going to get you anything. Any other name you can really throw out there, they're not really going to get you anything that would move the needle. And so Levert is still our best reserve in terms of scoring, right? And I don't think that can be understated. Overstated rather. I just think that guy, the versatility that he has, maybe it wasn't used right. Maybe he'll get back to being one of the more effective players under Kenny Atkinson, because that's where he experienced his highest level of play in Brooklyn in those years. But if you move Levert, you have to get somebody back at the very least that can replicate that same scoring punch. I just don't see that being the case. I truly do not. And so I think Levert stays. I don't think you can really move up off of him right now, because unless you're saying to me that you are ready for year 2 Craig Porter Jr. to take the reins and you believe Craig Porter Jr. is going to be that scoring punch, or you believe that Emoni Bates is going to take a big enough of a leap to be that scoring punch off the bench, things that are certainly possible. Or Jalen Tyson, throw Jalen in there as well. He functioned as the de facto point guard at California. We know that he had a very efficient off-ball role at Texas Tech. He can do a lot of different things. He can play 1 through 3. Did so at the collegiate level. But would you really feel comfortable trusting a rookie? I don't know. You're probably going to opt to keep LeVert, right? If you're the Cavaliers, especially if you don't really have a replacement lined up. That's just where I'm at with that. I think we see LeVert return. I know he's going into his final season of his deal. The deal is heavily movable. And if the Cavaliers want to approach the season with a mindset of, well, let's wait until the trade deadline. Let's see who becomes available, or let's see how the team is faring. Maybe they make a move at that point with LeVert included. But I think it's pretty tough to move up off of him right now without having a solidified answer behind him. That's just where we're at right now. HJ17 Gaming also says, legit just need Mobley to average 20 and 10 and Garland to be 22, 23 self. A backup big and Cam Johnson, DeAndre Hunter, or Kuzma type 3 to have. Also to stay healthy this season. That last part, health, biggest fucking equation for this team, because in back-to-back seasons, we have seen just abysmal injury luck. I mean, even if you want to harken back a couple seasons ago before Donovan even arrived, right? You had the Colin Sexton meniscus tear. You had the Ricky Rubio ACL tear. You had Jarrett Allen fracturing his thumb. You had a number or a litany of other injuries along the way, whether you're talking about Darius Garland this past season with the broken jaw, or the season before that with some of the other injuries that were sustained. Help Darius Garland in 2022-23 season, he started that year off with a very, very debilitating injury to his face. The man continuously gets hit and raked and poked in the eyeball and just smacked all about. That man should probably wear a face mask from now on, right? But I say all this to say that injuries have just played such a big fucking role with this team. And last season was no different. They headed into the playoffs somewhat healthy, right? Dean Wade was still missing, but as time wore on, you lost Jarrett Allen for the rest of the playoffs after 4 games, I believe, against Orlando. You did not have him available at all against Boston. Donovan Mitchell missed basically most of the Boston series. And you really had to rely on some of these guys that have never been in this situation before to give you real production in the playoffs. Throw Caris LeVert in there, right? He missed a game. It was rough, and it's been rough for the past couple of years in regards to injuries. But at the end of the day, injuries do happen to everybody. Injuries do happen to every single team. So I can't sit here and use that as an excuse. But at the same time, I cannot mention it. It is relevant. If this Cavs team can stay healthy, if Kenny Atkinson can get more from a developmental standpoint out of a number of these reserves, if he can tap into the underdeveloped Evan Mobley in certain areas, if he can tap into the all-star version of Darius Garland, we're cooking. We are cooking. It's just, it's tough to sit here and watch what some of these other teams are doing and believe that we can compete, that we are true contenders. So I do understand that. We're watching moves be made for players like KCP over in Orlando. And I know they had a ton of cap space. And to me, honestly, when I look at their whole situation, I think to myself, man, it's kind of a failure. That's just me, because I think with all the cap that they had, they should have been able to get more. But they got KCP. They brought him in. You saw Paul George head over to Philadelphia, right? There are a number of other moves in these. You saw Boston retain some of their key players and re-signing Jason Tatum and Derek White. There just have been a lot of different moves this offseason, and watching them all occur back to back, and then watching Cleveland do basically nothing because they're hamstrung by this Okoro situation. And prior to the signing of Donovan Mitchell, the extension, they're kind of waiting things out and they're forced to do so. So it sucks ass to sit here and wait. But you have to have patience. And that's what I've tried to exercise day in and day out in regards to this team. Do I believe that they are title contenders as currently constructed? No. Well, what I do know is that it's a long off season. What I do know is that a lot can happen over the duration of the regular season. Hell, we saw that. Injuries can affect everything. Coaching can affect everything. A lot can happen. So while I do not view them as title contenders as currently constructed, the door's open. It's never truly closed. To the people out there that continuously say, well, as currently constructed, this team is no better than a 4 or 5 seed at best. I say, look at the last couple of finals participants. There have been 5 seeds. There have been 4 seeds. Hell, there have been 8th seeds, right? You're looking at Miami. It doesn't matter. You got to get hot at the right time. You got to have a little bit of luck. And you got to stay healthy. Those are big things. I think Cleveland can certainly get there. But at the end of the day, we do have to understand that this, my friends, is still a process. Still such a process that we just have to be patient with. Rome wasn't built in a day, to use the cliche, right? I know a lot of people, we live in a day and age where people just don't know what the word patience means. But that's where we're truly at with this team. We just have to remain patient. We have to hope that some of these guys hit in terms of some of the draft picks we just brought in, right? When talking about Emoni, hoping that he actually develops. We're talking about Jalen Tyson to actually turn into a player that can contribute as early as this season, even as unlikely as that may be in some people's eyes. You just have to let nature take its course. The Cavs entered this offseason with some very real question marks. First being, is Donovan Mitchell going to is he going to sign and extend and sign on long term? That was the biggest question mark of all. After acquiring him, that was all it was ever going to be about during this offseason from the top. The coaching change, that's secondary. But after that, things obviously are a lot more murky than a lot of people truly realize. Nobody wants to sit here and just let things play out. Everybody wants things at the drop of a hat, the snap of a finger. You just have to be patient. I implore everybody out there, just if you're looking at the core 4 as they are right now, trust and understand that coaching matters. Trust and understand that the way that these guys are used can play a big role in how effective they can be during the 2024-25 year. I think from an X's and O's standpoint, Kenny is going to have them in the right direction. I've always felt that the primary concerns of this team, whether it be the lack of size in the backcourt and at 3, and in addition to the lack of spacing in the front court, I do believe that there are ways around that. Coaching matters. The coach has to find ways around it, and I think Kenny will. The emphasis on ball movement should open driving lanes for the ball handlers. It should allow for facilitation out of the post from the big men. It should allow for sharpshooters to get better looks, something that we consistently pleaded with JB to do. Get these guys real looks, get real actions run, make plays or run plays for guys like Mack Strus and Sam Merrill and Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. Hell, run something. That was one of the biggest complaints. That offense was just stale under JB. There just was no offense being ran at all at times. Kenny knows what he's doing. The first head coaching gig, yeah, it was hit and miss at times, but there was a clear track record for player development. He clearly had Brooklyn trending upward, and the introduction of Kyrie and Kevin Durant muddied the waters there. The question mark with him coming into this whole process was, can he coach star level talent? That was the one red flag that we were really looking at. And I think I think he can. He was given a raw deal with Brooklyn, and I think I think alongside some of the players that he'll be coaching, Donovan Mitchell in particular, I think you're really going to see an interesting dynamic here. And I think you're really going to see a lot of those questions put to bed. And I think they're going to be answered this year. All in all, as I came on here asking, because for me, it always helps to talk through some of these things, just to say them out loud. Because last year, if you guys don't remember, if you haven't been a viewer of this podcast for a while, I had my pie in the sky, just head in the clouds, oftentimes called them contenders when it was proven not to be the case pretty early on, right? This year, I'm trying to come in with realistic expectations, and those realistic expectations are that this team moves a step forward, right, in terms of the playoffs. They won a series last year. This year, hopefully, it is Eastern Conference Finals at the very least. That's where I'm at as currently constructed. Things can change, but I do not necessarily, as we are currently constructed right now, I do not expect this team to contend for a title in 2024-25. That is not my expectation just yet. Until we have the some of the pieces and holes filled in, that's where I'm at. I think that is okay. I think that is okay to admit that. The goal is always going to be championship. But in my opinion, it is okay to admit and understand that maybe that's just not where we are at right now in terms of this process. I think we're trending in the right direction. I think the Atkinson hire was another step in the right direction, but with some of the question marks still on the roster in terms of lack of front court spacing, in terms of lack of true size at the three position, in terms of the bench, in terms of the fit. I think it's okay to admit that. And that is where I'm at with this team. I'm not expecting title. It's not title or bust with me, especially since Donovan has signed on. But we have to see some type of improvement upon last season. Not just the record, not just the playoff wins, but the development. A lot of questions were asked during that introductory conference with Kenny with regards to player development. And if I don't see that shit happen after all of it being highly touted, I'm going to be pretty bummed out. But I choose to believe that is what we will see. That is where I'm at with this team. I do not believe that they are title contenders as currently constructed, but I do believe that anything is possible. We shall see. Andrew, a.k.a. Skunkski, says Kobe Altman should resign. Mike Gansey should resign. No roster moves, organizational malpractice. And so to that, Andrew, and I get it. I understand it. I've talked about it a little bit during this live stream. But to that, I ask, what were you expecting? What was your expectation? Because I think a lot of times expectations versus reality just kicks us in the ass a lot. What was your expectation? Was it a free agent signing or two? Was it a trade of the core four, one of the members? What is it, a trade along the margins? I would love to know. Because from where I'm sitting, with the Isaac Okoro situation yet to play out, with the team having to wait out whether or not Donovan was going to choose to extend, there wasn't a lot to be done. Cavs don't have a lot in terms of assets to move around. The cap space is not flush. It's not plenty. It's just the mid-level as of right now. And I get the frustration with not making a move on the free agent market, but I truly look at the Okoro situation and I'm saying to myself, they're trying to figure out what they can actually do. But I would love to know, man, what were your expectations? If you believe they truly should resign based upon their lack of any relevant move at all. Kirk Davis says, we have to have patience with this team. Remember Boston, Knicks, and many more was at the same spot we were in. Exactly, right? I know that people don't agree with that necessarily. Maybe they don't agree with that approach, but look at the Denver Nuggets as a perfect example of that. They took their time. They built around Nikola Jokic. They added pieces that fit, and they allowed the team to develop in real time. There were not championship level expectations from day one. There just weren't. And with this team, I understand the trade for Donovan Mitchell expedited that timeline. But when you're looking at what this team still needs, when you're looking at the assets that are not there, when you're looking at the coach, it's understandable. So please just have patience. HJ17 Gaming says players with high upsides who haven't reached their peaks and potential with minor needs to improve into a contender had a season riddled with injuries. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that was in response to a question in the comments. DJ Christman says, when I watched Max Strus last year with the Cavs, he seemed to be underutilized offensively, as opposed to Miami, who ran plenty of sets for him. What do you think? That is exactly what I touched on a minute ago, right? I wholeheartedly believe that. And I think the motion-based offense that Kenny Atkinson runs should heavily benefit players like Max Strus and Sam Merrill in particular. That's why I keep mentioning these names, because guys who are great on the ball, off-ball shooters, as well as guys who are movement shooters as well. Guys coming off of screens, some of the actions that are run, some of the sets that are run during the Brooklyn days under Atkinson, they're very, very, they appear to be very, very helpful to players like Max and Sam who are good on the move. I think a lot more open looks will be generated. I think a lot more cutting to the basket will be warranted because Max Strus is an underrated cutter. And I think a lot of facilitation, some of the DHO work that we saw this past season from guys like Jarrett Allen, who honestly had a pretty good chemistry going with Max Strus for a while out of the DHO from some of those sets that he ran. And from the high post, right? A lot of the Atkinson sets allow for multiple options. It's not just, okay, let's run a double stagger and hope that the shooter hasn't shot right there, or that you operate out of the high pick and roll, and if it's not there, then you just immediately break down, right? There are a lot of different options here. And I think that if you tap into some of these skill sets that these guys have, you'll get a better result. We know that Evan Mobley can play make a bit. Why not have him do that out of the post? We know that Max Strus and Sam Merrill are great movement shooters. Why not lean into that a little bit more? We know that some of these guys are underrated cutters. When you're talking about Donovan Mitchell, when you're talking about Max Strus, throw Isaac Okoro in there. Oh, cutter. They just have to be utilized. And I think JB failed time and time again to put these guys in the proper position to actually make use of these skill sets. And that, to me, is what entices me the most about shifting tides to Kenny Atkinson, because he will do that. There are question marks, but I think that they will be answered this year. I'm trying to go in with tempered expectations because I don't believe this team is title contendership just yet. I just don't see us there right now without having some of these holes filled. But I do think we take a step forward. I do think that this team has what it takes to make some noise in the East. Yes, it sucks that they haven't kept pace in regards to some of the moves that we have seen. But when you look at what we have available to us in terms of assets, it's understandable. I'm still pissed, but I understand it. Andrew says, I don't think they changed the coach just to keep everything the same. Firing the coach kind of implies changes needed to happen, and no changes have happened. He also says, I would have traded Jarrett Allen for a wing that would fit nicely in the starting small forward spot, and Mobley should be the center moving forward. Keeping same roster will be their downfall. It could be. I don't think it will, though. I think that when you're talking about moving on from Jarrett Allen, you have to get let's understand a few things too. If you move Jarrett Allen, you still have to acquire another big. I think that is so under talked about, right? A lot of people just completely ignore that. We still have a need for a third big. If you move Jarrett Allen and you shift Evan Mobley over to the 5 full time, you still have created a new problem that we don't have the assets to fix. If you move on from Jarrett Allen, who is your backup 4 or 5? You trust Niang? You trust Wade? I don't know. That's a personal opinion, I guess. But at the end of the day, just to touch on that subject, if you're going to move on from Jarrett Allen and the hope is to bring a starting caliber small forward, who is that? Who would that be at this point in time? Because it does not appear that the Cavaliers are all that interested or seriously interested enough in taking on whatever new contract Brandon Ingram could take or could make on his next deal. I just don't think that they are willing to do that. And again, you still have to figure out what you're going to do at backup big. You just don't have it. If you move Ja, as Claw says down here, if you move on from Ja, you need a starting power forward and a backup center. People continuously include Jarrett in these like ideal trade scenarios, but they completely just forget about or miss on the idea of those things. That you have essentially created another problem if that is the case. I just don't think Jarrett Allen would get you enough to justify doing that to me. You just can't do it. You can't do it. Jarrett is on one of the best contracts at his position. You look at what Isaiah Hartenstein just got. I mean, you just look at some of these deals for bigs. And Jarrett is making $20 million a year. If for a team that is trying to toe the line with first and second aprons, right, not going beyond there, so they're paying the luxury tax and whatnot, it makes sense to keep Jarrett for another season and see what you can do. That's where I'm at right now. I think that this team, I'll say it one last time, I do not believe that they are title contenders just yet, but anything can happen. They still have clear needs, and until those needs are filled or met, that is where they will remain in my eyes. They're just a touch out of being a contender. Just a smidge. You're just a smidge. And so I think that's really the most logical way to look at it. Brandon Garza says, okay, and you need a backup big regardless. So what point are you trying to make? To make a move for a backup big instead of addressing the starting problem? I'm not sure if that's directed at me or somebody else in the chat, but I'll say this, right? If you move Jarrett Allen and you slide over Evan Mobley, you still have to fill not only a starting position, because you have to get somebody who fits next to Evan Mobley at that point at the 4. You have to get a big too. You still need a backup center or a backup 4. Do you trust Dean Wade? I don't know. Personally, I love Dean Wade, right? We used to call this the official Dean Wade podcast. But the one thing that Dean Wade has shown us throughout the last couple of seasons is that he can't stay consistently healthy when it matters. So if you go in with that idea that you're going to rely upon Dean Wade staying healthy as your backup 4 for this upcoming season, I mean, I guess you can move on from Jarrett Allen, but you have to be able to get somebody that fits next to Evan Mobley as that starter. I just don't see it happening. I do not believe that they can do that. Brandon says, yes, so multiple moves need made then. It's fair to say that, Brandon, but what are those moves? I just think that people have an unrealistic expectation of what these guys' values are. Because if you're not likely to move up off of Jarrett Allen and Darius Garland, because those are your two players who would give you enough back to actually justify making those moves. Those are the moves. Those two trade pieces right there, that would get you a starter at the 4 beside Evan Mobley. That would get you a backup 4-5, right? And essentially, that would probably get you somebody who fits better next to Donovan Mitchell with a little bit more size. But it's just not going to happen. The value for Darius Garland is in the shitter right now. Jarrett Allen is still on a very, very beneficial contract for the Cavs. And Jarrett Allen alone is not going to get you back what people want. It's just not. To me, it's unrealistic. That's where I'm at, though. I don't know. Everybody, you're entitled to your own opinions. Everybody is. But that's where I see it right now. HJ17 Gaming says, I'm sticking with the core four in my opinion. Mobley just needs to shoot more threes at the same percentage. Plus, Mobley isn't big enough to be starting five unless he gains 20 pounds this offseason. I think that's a fair point. I think under Atkinson, you probably can make a case that Mobley will be taking 3 to 4 triples per game. At least that's what I would like to see. Because he had 5 games this past season, if I'm not mistaken, where he took at least 3 triples. And he shot fairly well in those, going about, I think it was 38.9% on games where he took at least 3 triples. If you can increase that volume this season for those games, if you can knock down at least 1 to 2 triples per game, if you're Evan Mobley at a respectable, 37-38%, I think you're opening the floor up a little bit more. I think some of those spacing concerns within the front court become a little less pronounced. But that is a problem that Kenny Atkinson is going to have to solve. He's going to have to require, and that's the word I'm going to use. He's going to have to require Evan Mobley to do that, at least 3 to 4 triples per game. Brandon also says, all I'm saying is multiple moves need to be made. So let's talk about those multiple moves. Step 1 is admitting more than one thing needs done and all. I think we're all there, Brandon. But as I've always said, man, what are those moves? I can say all the live long day that we need multiple moves to be made to fill these holes, but the value of the trade chips that we have, it's just not as high as we think it is. There were reports, right, that Jarrett Allen was drawing a ton of interest around the league for teams, but if you move Jarrett Allen, you're still creating another problem. So what are the other moves? Because you're not likely to be able to move up off of Darius's contract right now and get proper value back without taking a step back this year. George Niang, Karis LeVert, Isaac Okoro, they may get you something, but you can't expect those moves to get you a real contributor. Hopefully, Isaac Okoro can be signed and traded if we end up moving on for him. Hopefully, he can be signed and traded for a player like Cam Johnson or DeAndre Hunter, because if you do that, if you get DeAndre Hunter or you get a Cam Johnson, you maybe can start talk about okay, let's see about moving on from Jarrett Allen and seeing what he can get you back in return. But it is not a given. It's all about how other teams value them. To me, that's as simple as it gets. It's tough. We know the moves that need to be made, or at least we know what we need, but how we get there, that's the problem. We know we need a bigger wing. We know we need a backup 4-5. How we get there is the problem, all right? Without the assets, without first rounders really to give out, without real enticing trade chips, sans the core 4, that's the problem. I hate to sound like a broken record, so I'll shut it down there. But that is exactly the problem that we find ourselves with. Talking to Grubman Media says most fans want Ja traded because of the playoffs. A lot of fans are still mad he wouldn't get the shot for his bruised rib. Nobody knows his body but him. See, I wasn't even thinking about that, but at the end of the day, I understand. I understand why Jarrett Allen did what he did. And I'm never going to sit up here and say, hey, motherfucker should have played. All I'm going to say for him is that, dude was one of the most consistent, one of the most dependable players this season for the Cavs. Just one of the players. I mean, that's factoring in Donovan Mitchell as well. Jarrett Allen quite literally was one of the most dependable players on this roster. I don't know. Brandon says Murray fetched Hawks 2 firsts. He's older and made more all-stars than Garland. Kobe got to work that phone. I can't make him do his job. He keep getting his Pokemon. his Pokemon taking it at lunch. He got a stick. Bro, come on. You know better than that. Look at the season that Darius Garland just had in comparison to the season that DeJounte Murray had. Look at the contracts between the two. You got to understand. Yes, you can. But DeJounte Murray is a much different type of player than Darius Garland. Much different type. The market for small, ball-dominant point guards, it's just not there right now. You have to understand these things. Darius Garland is also not a noted defender. You can look at a player like Murray and see why a team like New Orleans would be interested in him. You could have made a case for Darius Garland as well in New Orleans, but without anything else out there, without any team out there, because teams are just not in the need for a player of his archetype right now. I hate to say that, but there are not a lot of teams out there that are point guard starved. That is just the case. Maybe, I mean, you can't even really say it with the Spurs anymore after acquiring Chris Paul. I just don't know. There just is not a flush market for players like Darius Garland right now. Got to understand that. Andrew says they sold Donovan Mitchell on being able to build a championship level roster and have done nothing. That seems contradictory. What did they sell him on? Sam Merrill and Ty Drum. They probably sold him on the progress that could be potentially made, the runway, right? Atkinson coming to town, that's a step in the right direction. But I can't speak for Donovan Mitchell, and I certainly can't speak for the organization. All I can say is that there are legitimate basketball reasons to look at this team. And if you're Donovan Mitchell, feel like, okay, this team does give me an interesting chance or a good chance to contend within the next 2 or 3 seasons, this year included. But you can't sit up here and just, we can't continue crying about none of these moves being made when we don't have a lot of assets to move. That's all I'm saying. To me, it's not contradictory. Donovan Mitchell, if he willingly signed on for a situation like this, you can rest assured that they sold him on the idea of the team continuously improving, whether that is internal growth, because whether or not we want to admit it, internal growth was probably one of the biggest bets heading into this season. Just this, the development of the core four, the development of some of the younger pieces on the roster. Internal growth was always going to be one of the bigger selling points to Donovan Mitchell, saying, hey, this team can still get better without making significant big-time moves. But Donovan Mitchell is the one who signed on the dotted line. That is what we wanted. I don't know. HJ says, you think B-Ball Paul would sign for a vet minimum? I would hope, right? He would fit a need at the backup 4-5. I like Paul Reed, but I personally, I don't think he will. We'll see. I do not believe Paul Reed ends up in Cleveland, but it would be nice. Claw says that Celtics series goes way different if Ja is there, JA. I need to stop calling him Ja if JA is there. I think so too, right? You look at them, what they were able to do with just scraps, right? Just scraps. Guys like Marcus Morris, and that is by no means a slight, but when you're working with Marcus Morris and you're hoping that he explodes the way that he did, and you're counting on that shit, I mean, it just tells you that everything you need to know about the state of the Cavaliers. Darius Garland struggled. Donovan Mitchell was not available. Jarrett Allen was not available. Karis LeVert was not available for at least one of the games. If you have Donovan, you have Jarrett, the Cavaliers very well could have pushed the Boston series 6-7 games, and nobody would even be saying half the shit that they are now. But we don't live in a world where we can, we can just we can know these things without seeing them play out. Because I can sit here and say, yeah, we could have carried them 6 or 7 games, but who knows? I choose to believe that, though. I choose to believe that internal growth will take this team a step further in 2024-25, along with the addition of Kenny Atkinson and the new offense that he will install that prioritizes ball movement, that prioritizes getting some of these guys developed. I think they take a step forward. And I think we just need to remain a little bit more patient than we have been. I get that we all look at the free agent market and we see no additions have been made. I get that we're looking at the holes that we still have a backup 4 or 5 and a bigger wing. I get it. But we just need to understand that the offseason is long. Sign and trade with Okoro may still happen. And this team is still trending upward and in the right direction, regardless of what some of these other teams are doing. Maybe you think I'm crazy. Maybe you think I don't. Or maybe you think I'm not. But that's just where I stand with this team. I choose to believe that we will get better. But keep in mind, we're not done yet. We're not done yet. That being said, if you'd like to reach out to me, you know how you can. It's Cavalier_pod on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and more. If you want to reach out, I believe I just said that. Jeez Louise. I do this every episode, guys. If you want to be added to the Discord chat, you know what to do. Leave a rating, leave a review, send a screenshot of the review to Cavalier53@gmail.com, and I will send you an invite. If you want to support the podcast in a small but helpful way, consider becoming a member over on Patreon. The link should be in the description of this episode. You never know how much that can help. I create this content all the live long day, and I will continue to do so for free, but it helps, right? Love to see that type of thing. Brandon Garza, just as a last comment, says Brandon Ingram becoming a point forward, averages 6 assists, just saying. I like Brandon Ingram, and I'll close on this, but Brandon Ingram has his own set of issues to work out. He's going to need a new deal that is likely to exceed $50+ million or very close to it, which will push the Cavaliers past the second apron, in my opinion. You still have to sign Evan Mobley, so keep that in mind. You already have a max contract on the books with Darius Garland. You already have a max contract on the books with Donovan Mitchell. Adding Ingram to that, to me, it just doesn't make sense if you're going to want to extend Evan Mobley to a rookie scale max extension. Keep that in mind. The contract plays a big factor in this because he's going to need a new deal. That, in addition to the fact that the motherfucker just cannot stay healthy. I look at him and I see a lot of potential, but one of the biggest, if not the biggest things that matters to me is availability. Availability is the best ability. So acquiring Brandon Ingram to me is just off the table. I get the allure, but I don't think it would be worth it ultimately when you're talking about the contractual obligations, when you're talking about the implications of what that can mean for your cap sheet in the next couple of seasons. I just don't think it'll be worth it. Cavaliers, I don't know, maybe they'll surprise us, but that is where we're at with this team. That said, go Cavs. Have a good night.